I asked your groups to talk about what citizenship meant, what it meant to be a good citizen, and what kinds of action citizens took. I suspect that you came up with answers about voting or belonging to political parties, as those are the most common answers I get when I ask my 102 students. However, in political science, we tend to think of citizenship a little bit more broadly as participation. Certainly voting, belonging to political parties, and even joining interest groups are one way to participate, but there are other ways that don't require as much action on the behalf of the individual. We define participation as the attempt to influence government, influence public policy making, or influence the general direction or the way things are going in your community. There are a number of factors that lead to higher participation within individuals. Those who have a higher socioeconomic status, those who are employed, those who have a higher education background, those who are middle-aged, and females are more likely to participate than their counterparts. I wanted to talk about two of these in just a little bit more depth. The first one is public opinion, and by the way, I promise I'm not giving you a very long political science lecture. It's quite easy to give your opinion, and this might be one form of being a good citizen. There are many different organizations in our society that try to collect the opinion of individuals. In the state of Wisconsin, the University of Madison does a poll twice a year on which they try to measure citizens' opinions about what's going on in our state. If you're interested in finding out more about it, you can find their latest polls on the website that's listed on the screen. Public opinion is important for two reasons. In theory, politicians should respond to their constituents. So in order for a politician to know how to react to a certain issue, they would have to have a poll of how their constituents felt. In practice, however, public opinion becomes much more about values. Those who have the strongest opinion on different situations going on in our society are often the loudest and then express their opinions the loudest, and so those are the items that get picked up on the public policy agenda. The word to describe that is called salience. If an issue has high salience, it's more likely for politicians to pay attention to it. The second one I wanted to talk about really briefly is direct action. I mostly brought this up because of the current Occupy Wall Street movement and the protest that happened in Madison during the last year. Certainly a way for citizens to participate is by direct contact with those around them. This can be something as simple as talking to your friends or family members about an important issue, or as serious as attack. Although I suspect you've seen or heard of many of the items on the screen, I suspect until recently they weren't super familiar to you. One I really think is interesting and probably worth noting, even though it's slightly political sciencey for a communications class, is takeover. A number of years ago, the Libertarian Party started a Free State project. Because the Libertarian Party is not a major political party in the United States, it's very hard for a libertarian to get elected to Congress. As a result, a number of those who belong to the Libertarian Party made a pact that within the next 10 years they would move to the state, I think it was Massachusetts, to try to get a high enough libertarian population in one state such that their elected officials would then be elected to Congress. I thought it's kind of an inventive example of citizen participation. I know that you were required to look at the American Democracy Project website, and if you scrolled around on there just a little bit, you would have found this report by the National and Community Service Foundation on civic life in America. The report defines citizenship or participation just a little bit differently than I just did from the field of political science. They focus on service, social connections, participation in a group, connecting to information and current events, and political actions. Between 2008 and 2010, they found that a majority of Americans were civically active in very rich ways. With nearly 9 in 10 American households sitting down to dinner frequently, more than half discussing politics at least several times a month, and a third actively participating in groups or organizations, civic life in America has remained dynamic, is what they conclude. A majority of Americans were active in many of the activities that comprise 3 of the 5 civic engagement categories, measured in the survey: political action, connecting to information, and social connectedness. Between 2008 and 2010, on average, over 70% of Americans discussed politics at least once a month, and over a third did so frequently. Over 2/3 of Americans had dinner as a household basically every day, and 88% did so frequently. Over half used the internet to talk to family members or friends frequently, and 31% did so every day. 2/3 talked to neighbors a few times a month, and 44% did so frequently. Older adults were found to be highly active in political and community life in many ways. They ranked either number 1 or number 2 across 13 of the 19 civic categories that were measured by the survey. Older adults ranked number 1 in church or religious involvement, service or civic group participation, and in doing favors for neighbors. Older adults ranked number 2 in contacting public officials, serving as a group officer or committee member, and having dinner with members of their household. Millennials were a little bit different, and I suspect most of you in the class are in the millennial generation. Millennials, who were born after 1982, ranked number 1 in talking via the internet frequently, and number 3 in participation of sports or recreation groups. I'm going to have another discussion question for you to discuss in your groups, and I want you to think of all of these different measures of citizenship or of participation, and think about how Web 2.0 technologies can enhance those modes of participation or citizenship. Please talk in groups of 2 or 3 again, and be prepared to share your answers with the class.